Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Amy. Hi, Amy. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Kieran.
It is. I'm sure lots of listeners will be very, very pleased that I've finally gotten around to sitting down to talk about mathematics education with you. But perhaps we should start with a little bit about who you are and how you got here today.
Okay. Well, you can probably tell by my accent that I might come from across the pond, and I do. So I'm Canadian, come from a very small town, one of under 500. So I feel like I've kind of made it here today if I'm on Kieran's podcast, coming from small town Nova Scotia, Canada. But yeah, so that's where my roots are. And obviously, I was what we would call an elementary teacher, so a primary teacher for almost 20 years. And in that time, I was asked to be a math mentor, which would be sort of like a maths lead, only it works with numerous schools. So you sort of go around working with different schools, different teachers. And I think that's when my passion for mathematics just really sort of took off. It's also when I heard about the Rekenrek. And then I realized, gosh, I'm making quite an impact, not just on my 30 children, but working with those other teachers in schools. And then I got a teaching gig at Acadia University and I taught the Bachelor of Education students. So again, sort of thinking, gosh, that's a really big impact. Then I worked at an overseas school in the Netherlands, which is, fun fact, where the Rekenrek was first designed. And since then, I think I just got a taste of Europe and said, I am not quite ready to go back to Canada yet. It is where I will retire. It is where my family is and my heart is. But yeah, I'm here to kind of spread the word on the Rekenrek and all of its benefits.
The people of the UK are very, I think, lucky that you decided this is the part of Europe you would spend some of your time in.
Oh, do you think? Oh, well, you know what? And I do have personal connections. My mom was British, and we used to come over and visit her parents and her sister. And I said to her one day, I just thought it was so beautiful and so different from Canada. And I said, you know what, Mom, someday I'm going to live there. And bless her heart, she's not with us now. She doesn't know that I'm here, but I think she'd be pretty proud that I've taken up residence and become a British citizen. So for those listeners that think, what is she here talking about mathematics in the UK? I am a dual citizen, Canadian and UK. Yeah.
I don't think that would cross anyone's mind, but anyone who was thinking that, they can rest easy for the rest of the episode. As well as appearing on the podcast today, you're also very kindly going to speak at our conference in London on the 18th of January. What are you going to speak about at that conference?
Yeah, I was really excited to get accepted as a speaker. So I'm going to kind of come and do what I tend to do at conferences is give a little bit of an intro on the 20 bead Rekenrek and the 100 bead Rekenrek, which are, very similar and yet very different in what they do and the concepts they can teach. So it's kind of to give people that are curious about the Rekenrek or have heard of the Rekenrek, but want to kind of give it a go and have a try and see, what the heck is this Rekenrek? So I'm kind of going to give us an overview, but it's going to be very engaging, very hands-on. It's not a lecture. It's you're going to come and try it for yourself.
I mean, that sounds wonderful. And having been in a few of your sessions before in the past, I know that it's going to be really, really beneficial for anyone who does decide to go. That's awesome. Now, we're going to explore mathematics education. The Rekenrek will feature. Mm-hmm. But something I try to ask everyone with sort of that maths specialism is, why is mathematics education so important?
It's strange that you would ask that. I almost feel that it goes without saying. How can it not be? If I were to think about getting ready for this podcast today, I had to know what time it was and how much longer I had, and did I have time to make a cup of tea? And if you think about phone numbers, if you think about banking, if you think about distance and measurement, everything. Every day we use mathematics. So I kind of was like, I don't know what I could add to that in terms of what the children need to know and how we can say to them, it is something you will use every day, not to the extent that maybe you can learn all of the extended concepts that are taught in mathematics, but the basics, absolutely. And so then I was thinking, Kieran, maybe he means in terms of teachers, why is mathematical education so important for teachers? And I started thinking about my background and how the Canadian system is quite different. And we are given, so much PD time that is mandatory to take. around learning new methods, about pedagogy, about misconceptions, about a certain concept that we need to teach. And so, we were sort of always given yearly professional development around mathematics. And I realized how important that was, and how, no offense, but I'm seeing that that isn't necessarily the case here in the UK, where it's provided free of charge to teachers, and sort of, that their understanding and that their mathematical knowledge is sort of always growing and learning. So I sort of see it as two-sided. And I have recently been saying, when people say to me, what do you do? It's kind of hard to explain. They don't know what a Rekenrek is. And if I say I'm a teacher, I am a teacher, but I don't have a classroom. So what I tell people now is I'm in the confidence building industry. And I think I want to build confidence in teachers to use a Rekenrek, and to think about, not to be afraid of mathematics, and have that trickle down into the children. Use the Rekenrek. Don't be afraid of it, and we'll kind of talk about that later. But I think it's very important that we look at mathematical education in not just the concepts and algorithms and things, but also how do we get rid of that stigma attached to it, and how do we really inspire and have children and teachers confident about the subject that they have to know, they will use.
Yeah, I think of all the times I've asked that, that's the first time I think anyone's considered the importance of this to teachers, because that's all, what we want to shift the narrative. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but obviously here it's acceptable to say things like I'm not very good at maths, and you want to push away from that as much as possible.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That stigma is something, children hear it at home, and it's really frustrating, and it's not new. And I know it's not just here, it is everywhere. But I think that's why I kind of went, what? I think I'm in education, but ultimately, if I can improve confidence using a very simple, hands-on, engaging tool, then it's a win. Because it's once you've shut down and you give up and you say, well, I'm never going to be good at it anyway, or I can't, or, that shutting down is exactly what we want to avoid. And I feel primary teachers, we're supposed to be good at everything, Kieran. We don't just go in and teach maths. We have to teach language arts and reading and writing and science and health and history. And, we have to teach everything. So it's no wonder there are teachers out there that think, gosh, if you could just let me teach writing, that's what I love. That's my passion. But I have to teach mathematics as well. So that's why I wrap my head around sort of both sides of the coin of that's why it's so important.
With your compulsory sort of training or your amount of hours, I've seen in some countries where it becomes a tick box exercise. What was your experience of it? Because obviously it sounds like that wasn't the case for you, and actually you were getting these really rich professional development opportunities. What do you think it was about it that allowed for that to take place?
Where I'm from, I think there's one private school in the entire province. So they're all government-based schools. We don't rank them in terms of, Ofsted ratings. If you live within the catchment area, in my small town, every child that was school age went to the same school. That's just the way it was. There was no picking and choosing. There was no sort of, and so I think the standard was sort of level. The playing field was level. And the education that you got and the training that you got after your education was leveled, so that those children that were transient, the quality of education they got, no matter where they went, no matter if they switched halfway through the year, it was, the quality was to be similar. Yet of course you have your excellent teachers, your good teachers, your so that will never change no matter where you go globally. But I felt it was a really lovely system that I didn't appreciate until I came here. And I thought, there are a lot of schools that would love, but don't have the budget for PD. And it's very sad that it is that kind of a system where it's not just all provided, because ultimately we want to be great teachers. We need to be, we need to put our focus into not just the way we were taught, but what's new and what can be done, and how can we sort of expand our understanding and our knowledge, and getting to these children the best.
Funding has got to come to a head at some point in the next 5 to 10 years, because certainly in my career, things have never been tighter, and things have never been tougher for schools on the ground. So fingers crossed. And then perhaps as we go through our curriculum review, we'll maybe get an opportunity for some sort of professional development review as well. You never know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it does make a difference. And when you know that you're going to get the training, there's going to be a spare, or a substitute, I can't remember the name for it here, to fill in for you for that day, and it's all covered, and it's not coming out of a school budget. It's literally, you will show up and there will be all of the year 4 teachers there in that science unit, and you'll leave with the same materials and the same understanding. And it was really, I took it for granted, I'll be honest. So if anyone in Canada is listening, I mean, I loved all of the PD, but I don't think I realized how lucky I was.
Are there any areas of mathematics which you feel are most important for pupils to get a strong sense of or an understanding of?
I think I would put at the top mental math skills. And I put it at the top because that's sort of real life, in the fact that we don't normally, I mean, we do have our phones, we do have calculators available on there, but for the most part, you're waiting for that train and it says it's coming at such and such a time. We're calculating in our head just mentally. We're grocery shopping, we're looking at our things and we're kind of estimating, do I have enough? Or so I think we're doing a lot of those things, and that skill is something that also builds us confidence when we can do it. So I would have to put mental math strategies at the top. And I do a workshop. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this workshop that I do, but yeah, so mental math strategies is one of the workshops. And I had someone say to me, that's really strange that you are using a mathematical tool to teach something that you're supposed to be doing in your head. And I said, yeah, I realize it sounds funny, but what I need to know is what is going on in a child's head. And the only way I can see what they're thinking is by using a tool like the Rekenrek. So I can say, show me what you're thinking, show me how you did that. And then I know what calculations and how they're sort of manipulating those numbers in their head. And years ago, mental math was sort of a massive part in the curriculum. And we always sort of compartmentalized it into 3 pillars, we called it. And so you had to know your bonds to 10. And if you knew your bonds to 10, it opened up all kinds of other strategies that linked to that. Counting on was sort of the basic one, where you sort of know a number and you can sort of get to the next number that you can, but it's not the most efficient. And it's sort of, you hit the wall, and if that's the only strategy you have, you're kind of in trouble. And then the last one is doubles, and knowing your doubles then opens up all kinds of other strategies. And it's amazing how knowing those 3 pillars and teaching teachers now to sort of think of it as 3 pillars, teach them the 3 pillars, and they will be able to do that with fractions, with decimals, with larger numbers, but they've got to get that basic, that understanding and the confidence to be able to manipulate numbers in their head, know how it works, see it done different ways, pick the strategy that works for them, and then be successful in whatever that answer is. So yeah, Kieran, I'm going to say mental math at the top. Is that an unusual answer that people give you? Or
I mean, this isn't a question that I ask lots of people, but
okay.
I think it would definitely be something that I know a lot of people prioritize.
Yeah.
And as you say, I mean, I'd written a note there about your time here. Had you noticed anything, a deterioration perhaps in the focus on mental mathematics, because it was in the curriculum very specifically, and then it sort of faded, still there to an extent,
Yeah,
but not as explicitly as perhaps it was in the past. So I think it is definitely something at the fore of our minds, and it's also something I think we should spend more time on, because I think with the appendix in the national curriculum, we've got obviously the formal written algorithms, and there's only a very small portion of time where a mental method takes longer than the formal algorithm, and with fewer opportunities for errors. I don't know, what is that sort of, does that align with your sort of experience of how maths has almost changed over the last, in your time here?
I don't think I'm the person to answer that question. I know what teachers are telling me, and I know that they're saying that, because the curriculum is so jam-packed and they have to cover so much in the year, that what they're finding is if they don't have those sort of skills to pull from their mental math strategies, even those, the basic number bonds and number sense and all of that children are sort of mired in that and can't move on to those algorithms, because an algorithm is great if you can mentally calculate as you go through. Yeah. It's not so great if you're stuck only with the counting on strategy as you're trying to figure out what that first, column in column addition is. And I think, yeah, I think we jump too quickly into algorithms. And again, I think that concept comes back to my mental math strategies, in that the way you might figure out a certain question in your head. What am I looking for? Accuracy, 100%. I want you to be right. I want to be right. But the way we get there might be different. And I'm okay with that, unless the way I get there is very inefficient. And I listen to your way and I go, my gosh, now that works. The only way I know how to do it is in my head this way. But I just heard you say it, or I watched you do it on a Rekenrek, and I think, well, there we go. There's a new strategy that I can implement that works for me, and I understand it, and I can appreciate, so it's embedding personal strategies and learning from others what theirs are, so that we can sort of pick and choose as to how we get to that answer. But in terms of, has it changed? I really can't answer that. I really can't answer that. And I would say there are other things that are as important. Mental math would be probably my top one, but I also think about, number sense in general is something that I do a lot of work on. And I won't use the F word, fluency, but there are things that children should know, which again gives them A, confidence, and B, that ability to be, a little bit more, a little bit faster, a little bit more efficient with their mathematics. So accuracy and efficiency, so important, but it flounders if you don't have that basis.
Absolutely. I think I heard it described as you're doing twice the work for half the payoff whenever that stuff's absent. And I think it was two guys, Tall and Gray,
Yeah.
from the 90s. And yeah, that really stuck with me, because I've seen children, say they're year 2,
Mm-hmm.
and they're stuck with the countdown strategy, but they're manipulating 2 and 3 digit numbers, but one at a time. And you're thinking, wow, this is, I need to do something about this.
Yeah. And, just another little plug for the Rekenrek is that I actually can see those children that are doing the one counting on strategy, because I watch them and I see them head bobbing as they're, kind of going through the process. And I go, I know exactly where you are. I know exactly where I need to come in. Those misconceptions come to life when a child is showing you what's going on up here. And I think that's the real power of a manipulative like a Rekenrek, because I can get inside of their heads, because their favorite answer often, even if they give the wrong answer and I ask them, well, how did you get that? Well, I just knew it, or I did it in my head. And that's no help to anyone else in the classroom, because they might have a really great strategy. But if they're incorrect, how am I supposed to unpick that? How am I supposed to get into that misconception and say, I can see exactly, look, you're fine up to about here, and then there's a missing link, or there's a kink in the rope or something, and we need to just untwist that and get you back on track. And we as teachers, that's really tough when you've got 30 children and you're sort of monitoring and evaluating, and you're teaching new skills, and you're wondering, okay, well, they've got it and they don't, and they really don't, and how do you sort of bring them all forward? And that to me is one of the powerful things about using manipulatives in a class, that I can see what you're thinking. And then I ask you, well, what do you mean? Show me, tell me. Can you explain what you're doing there? And then it all just kind of comes out, and I can say, wow, either A, that was fabulous. Does everybody see that? Do you see how Kieran did that? Do you understand? Or I can have a private conversation with you and say, look, okay, see how you got to 27? When actually, let's try this again. And you added 9. Oh, did you add 9? No, it should be 26. There you go. So it's that observation of where they're going, where they're coming along really nicely, but also where they're starting to embed, the misconceptions are starting to show their head, and then the gaps. And that only gets worse with the years as they spend in school.
I mean, I don't know how anyone could not be convinced, because I imagine it as this space almost between your eyes and your brain. We do mental maths, and I'm sure it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
But like you say, it's what you want to do is you want to get into that space, and you want to be able to manipulate the ideas that are going on in there. And you're basically being really forensic in your assessment of where pupils are and then bringing them to where you want to be. So, I mean, what more you can't ask for more than that in a math classroom, can you?
There you go. No, no. And you know, and it's wonderful. Even when I do the workshops with teachers, and there are a couple of activities that I'll do that I sort of say, now don't look at anyone else, just do this task. And then at the end, I want you to look, and does your Rekenrek look like theirs? And did you all get the same answer? And isn't that amazing how we came to the exact accurate answer, and yet there are about 5 different ways of getting there. And then we talk through sort of how we did it. And you'll have people go, oh, I didn't even see that. Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. That's a great method. And I think that's when the penny drops for children as well, because you can only do it the way you do it. You know, and can I segue into teachers as well, thinking, how can you teach multiple strategies if the only way you do it is your way in your head? But Kieran, your way may not work for me. It may not just work. You know, I can probably follow the steps and do as you say, but it may not be as clear, and it may not be as quick, and I may not feel as comfortable doing it. But then someone else tells me, and I go, oh, I get it. Yeah. So I feel that sort of showing multiple strategies, whether it's an addition and subtraction, or, you know, fractions, or talking about how did you do it and what did you see, but mostly mental math strategies, so that they can go, oh yeah, there is a different way, and I like that way for that question, but I like this way for this, you know. And so there's that, yes, we need the right answer, but it's not always, it's the process of getting there too.
Does that kind of freedom for the pupils or the children come at a certain point in their experience with the Rekenrek? Because I remember when we did directed number, obviously we were with a group of secondary teachers,
Yeah.
and they do not necessarily, you know, I don't know if I'm speaking too generally here, but it's a different way of thinking about directed number than is fairly typical in my experience. And so we had very small steps, and then you built us up slowly until, you know, I don't think we were at the point at the start where we could have very easily said, oh yeah, let's do this, and here's my method. Yeah. Is that reflected in the way you approach this? You know, so if you had a class and you've been using the Rekenrek for a long time, they get more freedom, or is it from the very start they have that freedom?
So for the younger learners, I actually pull completely back, with the exception of a few things that I teach. Number bonds to 10, I say I only want you using the top row, and I want them using the top row because they can clearly see how many more make 10. So there are times when I kind of go, this is how I want you to do. When you're building doubles, I want you to build the same number on the top as the bottom, so you can see what a double is, the concept around it. But when we're doing mental math strategies and things like that, I'm asking them, what's 9 plus 6? And I say, just show me. Show me what that is. And that's when I see different ways. And I say to them, show me how you did it. Let's all try it Kieran's way. Oh, you show me how you did it. Let's all try it this way. Addition and subtraction, same thing. Here's the question. Off you go. And you watch people kind of wanting to look next to them to see, how's he doing it? Oh, I must not be doing that right, because I was, you know, and yet what they come to realize is we do think differently. We learn differently. We see differently. But if you can explain to me what you did and it makes sense to you and one other person, then it's a perfectly valid strategy if the answer is correct. So I think that what you saw was sort of a different, I knew you'd never used them before. It was very specific, and I tried to cover a lot of concepts. So it was kind of like, well, follow me doing this and this and this and this and this. Whereas in a natural classroom, it's very much guided exploration, shall we call it? Yeah. Guided exploration is very focused, because you cannot make a gun out of these Rekenreks. You cannot, you know, argue with the person beside you about what color counters do you have as you're stacking them and flinging them. You have a tool in front of you that is, there's very little you can do other than the mathematics. So it tends to kind of focus them in on the task at hand, and yet it gives them the freedom to try it their way. So it's an interesting, simple tool.
No, that makes total sense. So it's almost like different scenario, so different set of instructional principles, which obviously is totally natural, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think I mean I know a 7-year-old who could probably try and make a gun out of a Rekenrek if you give him enough time. He seems to do it with most of the things in this house,
right? You know, and sometimes they'll build, you know, 34 and say, do you think this looks because it kind of does look like a gun. But at least it's, that distraction and that sort of desire. And I, can I also say that I sometimes get a bad rap because it sounds like I'm putting down other manipulatives. Oh, they're too messy. Oh, they're too time consuming. Oh, the storage and the getting them out is, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is this is yet another tool. And what teachers tell me, what they love about it is that it is literally mess free. And sometimes they'll say, I would love to be able to use Deans in my classroom and double-sided counters in the blocks, but you've never seen my class. And it is absolute bedlam and it is chaos. And I think what a shame, though, that they're not having the use of hands-on tools to build and learn mathematics, because things become non-mathematical and it becomes a behavior lesson rather than a maths lesson. Yeah.
And it's about the right manipulative for the job at hand, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
And I always talk about, whenever I'm talking to people about manipulative selection or representation selection, opportunity cost is the very first thing. So, do you have them in school? Can you afford to have them in school? And is there enough space on the desk? For instance, I don't, with the base 10 equipment, I'll very rarely go beyond 3-digit numbers, because I've never been in a classroom with enough space for those big 1,000 blocks to actually be on the desks. And so I'm totally with you on that, because I think the opportunity cost is the first thing you need to think about. Is this possible? If it's not, well, then maybe a virtual manipulative is something I'm going to use instead, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's almost that backwards learning when that backwards planning for a lesson plan. What is the goal of it? But how am I going to get there with the best method and the best tools? And yeah, I mean, I would love to say the Rekenrek does everything, but you know what? Measurement and geometry are not going to be something that I can ever teach you with a Rekenrek. And I also think representation, multiple representations, was always something that was a very powerful tool to see if children understood it. Can they show me using Deans and a Rekenrek and place value counters and pictorially, and with digits? Can they show me all of those ways? Because if they can, they've really got it. But if they can only do one of those, they can only write the digits, but they can't show it any other way. That representation is, is that up to the quality that I would want? No. So yeah, I have to agree with you wholeheartedly on that.
We've almost started bridging into my next question, which is, how can the Rekenrek support pupils in developing a fuller sense of mathematics? I mean, is there anything you would add to what we've already discussed?
I think another thing that I've always thought about in mathematics, and kind of going back to the basic understanding, is I think about when I was a teacher and I was teaching reading, I had sort of 5 or 6 reading strategies that we would teach children. This is how you're going to sort of decode the word. You're going to skip and come back. You're going to sound it out. You're going to, phonics. And there were sort of 5 things that you could do to really kind of have them decode what on earth that word was that they stumbled upon. And once they had those 5 skills, it didn't really matter how big the word was. The same rules would apply to all of that. And I guess I think of mathematics, you have got to get that foundation down pat on place value, numbers to 10, numbers to 20, and then 50 and 100. And once you've got that, it doesn't matter how big the digits are. Place value system is identical no matter where you are. Mental math strategies, again, can be used no matter what the numbers are, or if it's fractions or decimals. Or I feel like that foundational piece, just like reading, without that, it's really difficult to move on. And that's why that gap in their understanding starts early, and it just grows as they go through. And it's got to be frustrating. And I understand why they dislike mathematics by year 5. It becomes just something that they didn't understand in the beginning, let alone as they move forward, and the numbers get bigger. Just like young readers will say, oh, I can read a big word, and they think it's really amazing, but really what they've got is great reading strategies. So yeah, just kind of wanted to stick that in there too.
When it's tough to learn something, when like the gulf is too big, it physically hurts my head, because I try to learn lots of different things, maybe piano, maybe languages, and I'm always trying to learn something new. But when I misjudge the gap between where I am and where I want to be, it's physically uncomfortable. So I can imagine that in my pupils.
Yeah.
They're going to be feeling that sensation with mathematics, particularly when you get to maybe like 10, 11, 12 years old. That gulf can be massive. And I can imagine very, very frustrating.
Yeah. And that's what we don't want. Again, confidence building industry is that's what I really, really want to do.
So, I mean, I reckon listeners are going to be thinking, if they weren't already, that the Rekenrek is going to be a really powerful tool in their classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
But where do they begin if if this is the first time they're hearing about it, or they haven't had access to it and they're keen to explore? I
Mm-hmm.
think both in terms of concepts and resources, and obviously I'll plug for you Rekenrek 101, which is a book published by John Catt, and I think is probably the best starting point before before you really get going. But where else would you send people?
Oh, see, and I would probably wasn't even going to mention the book. Um, yeah, where would I start? I think a lot of people hear about me at conferences. So honestly, coming to your conference and saying, oh, I'm kind of curious about this. And I want to kind of have a go. And I don't really want to read a book about it, but I want to see it for myself, because I don't think a Rekenrek is one of those catalog Amazon best purchases because it's beautiful. I mean, it is quite lovely, but a Rekenrek doesn't sell, and you can't understand the power of how versatile it is until you've actually tried it yourself. So I would love to see people come to a workshop that I'm doing. I do try every once in a while to have some online introductory, sort of an introductory session that's free and that you can sign up. I don't do them as often as I could, but people that come kind of go, oh, okay, now I can see what that's about. I'd love to say, go check out my YouTube channel, which has one video that I did about 5 years ago. But again, I'm not very good at following up on some of these things. But you can go to my website. You can see that I do have some very specific workshops that are available. I do them face-to-face, which is my preference. I love the interaction with people. I love the gasps and the wows. I love to read the feedback forms when I finish, because people really do say things like, why have I never heard of this before? What how come you're just telling me about this now? I wish I had learned fractions using this when I was in school. I've had people almost tear up and say, my God, Amy, I actually understand decimals now. I actually understand them. And that's in 90 minutes. And I give that crash course on, this is everything you can teach with decimals in a very condensed version. But I think, come to my website, reach out to me, go to conferences. I will say that I am in the process of doing videos, because I realize, Kieran, with budgets nowadays, to have me come to your school and do a face-to-face training, budgets just don't allow. And I'm on a mission to get these in the hands of teachers and children. So I've thought, you know what? I think I need to invest in videos where people can sort of download and stream some bite-sized modules to kind of get the hang of it and see where it goes and see how far they go on their Rekenrek journey. Because most schools have me in, would love to have me back and say, maybe next year, Amy, we just can't afford it, but we loved it, and send me pictures and testimonials. And yeah, so budget friendly is where I need to go from here, and have that opportunity for people.
I mean, that sounds wonderful. It's a shame that is the case, but in your mind, are you then going to think about the mathematical concepts, like just maybe starting with bonds, or perhaps starting with numbers within I suppose it would within 5 or within like 7 would you work with initially?
Well, Kieran, honestly, there are two Rekenreks, and so it depends. And I mean, shockingly, I have them right here beside me. But so the 20 bead Rekenrek would be for children for numbers up to 20, and where we would start with that would be literally with number sense and understanding and counting on and additions. All of those concepts would start with this, not isolated, but they actually work together. Subitizing on here, estimating, number bonds to 10. All of that can happen on this one tool. But I think the NCETM, I was talking about this for about 3 years, and all of a sudden I saw the thing on the news saying, Rekenrek's mastery of number, and this is what's going to be rolled out. And I was absolutely thrilled. I thought, oh, thankfully it's now becoming more understood and people are rolling it out. But what I think has happened also is that if you didn't take the training, you still don't know what to do about it. Or what I want to do is come in also, if you've heard about it, you did the mastery and you think this is a really great tool for those basic concepts for numbers up to 20, then I want you to join me on the Rekenrek journey of up to 100, because that's where number sense becomes the concept of the value. And I think this was a big eye opener for some people, is when I do, probably the opening task is, I want you to build me 32. I want you to tell me everything you know about 32. And I want you to prove it on a Rekenrek. And we tend to think in terms of place value. If a child can say, and fill in the blanks, there are tens and ones, they've got place value. And I say, we need to be very careful, because even if they can fit it in a T-chart, 3 tens and 2 ones, there's so much more to 32 than that. So it's teaching children the value of a number. How big is it? What does it mean? Is it greater than or less than? How far away from 50 is it? What are the different ways that we can partition it other than 3 tens and 2 ones? When we think about rounding that number, look at your Rekenrek. Is it closer to 30 or 40? No rule. Just look at it and tell me what you think. So I often start with that basic number sense. Build me a number and let's talk about what we know about this number. And most people, that's honestly where they go, if I could do this every day with my children, even in year 4, it would make a huge difference, because they would actually start to understand that when I say 57, they'd know where it went on a number line because they'd built it and they could see it was greater than half. They would be able to sort of break it into 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. And they really start to get that concept of the value. And what does 52 mean other than the fill in the blankness of a worksheet? I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not a big worksheet. I'm not a big fan of worksheets. I think you have to do the maths and talk about the maths, but yeah. So I would start with number sense with both of them. And then because of the configuration of it, the 5-ness of 5 and the 10-ness of 10 and the 10 rows and the 100 beads, which, yes, I know looks like an abacus, but it's not. You can start to see, even if I said to you, if I were teaching percentages and I said 1/4 is how much, you would literally be able to see this Rekenrek has 4 exact quantities and quadrants, and how many beads are in one of those quadrants or one of those color configurations. Well, they're groups of 5. So even if you didn't know, you could go 5, 10, 15. So 25 is 1/4 of, and so we can start to get concepts that they just need to see it and get it in their brain. I feel like I could go on for days. See, now you can't get me stopped.
I wouldn't want to stop you either, because these are going to be fantastic. And yeah, I totally see where you're coming from. And you mentioned year 4. I think especially year 4. Because if the children haven't seen it by then, then just because they're year 4 doesn't mean you're going to stop trying to show them that, and introduce them to these ideas. So I'm 100% big time with you.
Yeah, and I think what I say to teachers, because I work with teachers as much. Again, I say it's about building their confidence, and I say to them, when these children are sitting in front of you with all of their Rekenreks on their desk, and I'm going to put it as if it were in front of me here, and I'm working here, and I'm saying, I want you to build this particular number, and you're watching me as I'm struggling with, you can literally monitor the whole class of what's going on as you're watching people from looking through the Rekenrek and seeing what they're doing. You can literally, they don't even have to say anything. You can see it. And if you're working with children that have the manipulatives on their desk, and I were building that same quantity with Dean's or whatever, I'm sort of having to go over their shoulder the whole time and see. So it's a lovely sort of quick at a glance. I often talk about when you're a teacher, you're like a cop. You have to have conversations about what they're doing. You have to observe what they're doing. And the final product has to be, what you're looking for in terms of the question that you've asked. So, it's much easier for us to do that assessment whole class. And I use a Rekenrek whole class. I don't want it just used for the children that are struggling. I want them using it 100%. But what's been really fascinating is secondary teachers, as you know, sometimes will come to my workshops and they don't really want to get out all the they don't even have them in their classrooms. Let's be honest, their classrooms aren't stocked the way primary classrooms are. But then they look at this, they say, but you know what? I think my students wouldn't be as embarrassed or unwilling to try this because it's nothing they may be used in primary school. So it doesn't have that stigma attached to it. We're talking about decimals and we're using this. And it's not pink and green and it's not childlike. It's very much looking like a solid tool. So I really love that about the Rekenrek, so that we don't have to think about secondary children aren't going to want to, they're not going to want to use this. They actually are. They have no problem using it, and they love manipulating it, and it's kind of a nice change for them.
Especially when they've got a superficial understanding of the concept, much better to really try and get under the skin of it, and I think that kind of attitude comes from the teachers because, these aren't tools for calculation just to support those, like you say, those people who struggle with mathematics. And I often try when I'm working with teachers to give them some sort of task that shows you the power of manipulatives with, almost to the point of generalization or like in some sort of really rich problem.
Yeah.
Because then they say, and I really like that idea that even if those pupils may think this is, they may think other manipulatives are childish because they've had a negative connotation in the past.
Mm-hmm.
The Rekenrek's this fresh, certainly I don't know if I mean fresh as in new, but it's not something that they have had experience of before. And in my mind, when I see them, I always think of like really rapid calculations, just like you would in abacus as well.
Yeah.
So maybe that might be something actually might attract them to it. I don't know, but obviously that's just me imagining things as opposed to having spoken to someone about that before.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is appealing. And I think when I've had secondary teachers say, you know what, I think this actually would be perfect for, my year 7s or year 8s or, and they'll often say to me, they don't know their times tables. They don't know their times tables. And I say, oh my gosh, I teach a whole workshop on times tables using this. That's more than just automatic recall. It's, it's about patterns, and it's about the daily practice, and it's about partitioning numbers that you're doing through repeated addition. And I say, oh, it's incredible what this tool can do. And it's really sad when you have children that do come to secondary school and they don't have that solid foundation. So, if that tool can help to get them to really understand what are equivalent fractions and can you see it, it can be jaw-dropping, and yet it can be scary too. I'll say that too, because I have teachers who come to the workshop and I'll do something on fractions and I use it, and because it's nothing they've ever done before, they literally panic, and then they go, I don't know if I see this kind of thing. And I say, good, I'm glad. You know why? Because that you have a student in your class that feels the exact same way when you're getting out that worksheet for them to do, or you're getting out that other manipulative and you're just rushing through the algorithm, and they're going, oh, I don't get this. And that feeling is what you're feeling, and that's great. But we're going to keep going, and when you leave, you're going to feel really good about it. But it's I think I'm able to put teachers in the position of, oh yeah, that's what it feels like to try something that you think but with something completely different that really kind of makes you uncomfortable because you have to show it in a different way.
I think listeners will be, like I say, convinced of the power of the Rekenrek.
I hope so.
I think if they are in need of confidence, I think you're absolutely the right person to give them that. And so I'm looking forward to seeing you in January. And where can listeners reach you in between now and then? What's the best place to find you?
Yeah, I'm kind of more active now on Instagram. Everything is Rekenrek 101. So you're going to find me, if you use that as the handle to find me, you'll find my website. You'll find me on Twitter. You'll find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. So it's kind of I try to keep it very simple like that. If you want to email me, it's rekenrek101@gmail.com. So it's all of those. Yeah, it's like a Rekenrek. I like to just keep it simple and all inclusive. So there you go. Rekenrek 101.
Fantastic. I mean, I think we've covered a lot, and there's definitely more to cover in the future. All that's left to do is say thank you very much for joining me.
Kieran, it has been, yeah, a bit nerve-wracking at first, but I am so pleased that you asked me. And this will help me to have my mission accomplished of getting the word out on the Rekenrek. So thank you so, so much.
No, the pleasure's all mine. And to everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.